Everybody's talking. They were like, the people have spoken. They like it. They like you a lot. I didn't choose that song. She chose that song, and then I started to cry, and I realized when my sister got married, I only have one sibling, that was her first dance. And I didn't remember until you sang that. Yeah. Why you gotta get me emotional, Chelsea? I'm trying to be a functional human right now. So, thank you. Thank you for inviting me. I haven't spoken in a long time. It's been a long time in front of people, only in front of a stupid computer. Sick of that. It's weird. I could be, speaking in front of hundreds of people, but you get nothing back on a computer. But you can speak to one person and you get so much back when it's physical. So, I don't want to act like an expert. I hate it when people do that or like they have all the answers or anything like that. I'm coming from a place today where when I met God and when I met this movement, the one distinction, the one thing that I really wanted to do was know if I could have a pure heart again. Because I had like an incredibly pure heart as a kid, and then I kind of lost that around the time when my parents were getting divorced, when I was in like middle school-ish, and that was a long time. And then I found that it's true. You can purify your heart again. There is a process. That is the principle, actually. It's to be able to kind of wash your heart clean again and again and again, no matter what you go through. And so I wanted to do that because I wanted something really pure in my life, and that thing was my marriage. So I'm coming from that place and also from the place where the past 6 years I've been devoted to High Noon. I feel like my time there is winding down, like God's calling me somewhere else, but it's really getting this message out to the world that if we really want peace out there, we have to really have peace in here. It's impossible to do the inverse of that. And it's more convenient to expect that, right? Like, outsource peace. Yeah, they'll figure it out, right? Somewhere, Elon Musk is going to figure it out, right? He'll create some sort of bot that can make peace in our heart. But that's not the case. We all know that, but some part of us wants to resist that. Can somebody shut that kid up? It's my kid. Ozzy, can you listen? Or you're going to have to get out. And then no more food for the rest of the month. It's called love. It's called tough love, everybody. Okay. So I'm coming from the place where this has been my focus, but I don't have all the answers. But I have spoken to thousands of people, and I've counseled hundreds of people, and I've noticed a bunch of themes. And from those themes, I've created modalities that I adhere to very strictly, and that's what allows me to keep this marriage. Because it's so far beyond me. I'm so unqualified. I think we're all, in many ways, unqualified to receive somebody in our life. But if we adhere to a certain regimen, then we can ride that wave of love, okay? So before we get started, I just wanted to give a few frameworks that I think are fundamental and that I absolutely live by. And the first one is this. What I've noticed is that when you have ideals, you probably can't read this. This is usually on a giant screen, but ideals are on one side. And when we have ideals, which we do, your hopes, your dreams, your desires, the life that you would love to have, but you feel separate from those ideals, that's when you experience pain. And you start to feel, if you live long enough away from your ideals, like especially we're talking about marriage, I want a happy marriage. If you don't experience that happiness for long enough, you start to, in many ways, resent those ideals and accuse them. There's two ways that people typically go. They either judge themselves and say, I suck, and I'm ruining this marriage, or they judge the other person. Or in many cases now, we're seeing a society where people are judging marriage altogether. That doesn't work, right? They're abandoning marriage in droves. And this is where, hell is created, okay? Is in that space between you and your ideals. And the point is not to always be perfect. The point is to always be on track towards fulfilling your ideals. Because when you start to deviate from that, that's where you get lost in the forest. That's when you get lost in the jungle. Second thing is, I've seen this in so many cases, all ages. We've spoken in High Noon around the world at this point. We know people all over the place, and it's the same. Marriage is marriage. People are people. What they argue about sometimes changes, but ultimately it's the same stuff. And when you have some sort of shame because you're not living up to the life that you want, you develop these self-destructive habits. And that causes you to feel more shame. And then you go back to your self-destructive habits. And that could be fighting or judging. My thing is, when I'm separate from my ideals, I become very sarcastic with my wife. And the crazy thing is, my wife doesn't understand what sarcasm is, so it has no impact on her whatsoever. It's like shooting a ghost, and the bullets just bounce back and hit you. It's useless. And so that's why God gave me a Mongolian. There's no sarcasm in that culture. It's amazing. But for other people, it could be avoidance. There's a lot of escapism in our modern society. Our phones are the great escape. It's so easy to get away from your thoughts and from your feelings and going into your phone, right? But when you come back, those negative feelings have accumulated and they jump on you and you feel even worse. And so a lot of people get caught in this self-destructive cycle. Now this is Chanulguk, the definition of Chanulguk. The world that we're trying to build the definition is when two become one. So when two hearts are truly one, you feel what the other person feels, for better or for worse. You feel their pain. You feel their joy. But in that space between hearts, when I have a calloused heart towards somebody, I can justify doing anything I want. And that's what we're seeing in Ukraine and Russia right now. The humanity is lost because there's a narrative, oh, these people are like this, these people are like this. That's happening on a global scale, but we've seen it in our own lives, right? When we judge other people, and that's hell on earth. You don't have, I think the afterlife is very mysterious, and the people who focus too much on that, they start to, I think it's good to know some stuff about that, but there's some weird stuff in there too, But here on earth, practically speaking, hell on earth is when we're not connected in heart, because you can justify anything when you don't care about something or somebody, okay? So these things are really important. I've noticed in the work that I've done is my God, in order to separate or to get rid of that line, that arrow, and to merge hearts, that's the hard stuff. That's the restoration. That's the learning how to love again. And I will get into that a little bit, okay? So these are 7 things that I think are extremely important for me. And again, if I don't implement these, my marriage starts to get really funky, right? If I don't maintain, just like health, right? You start eating one donut and then you start eating donut a day, and all of a sudden the train is off the tracks. You've lost your game plan, right? You need to adhere to a certain regimen of health in order to be healthy. Same with love. You need to invest daily in order to have a healthy relationship. And that's with yourself, with God, and with a partner, okay? So here's the first one. This is to me the most important one, is that relationships are living, breathing organisms. They are alive, okay? A lot of people think that relationships are just amorphous, or it's my friend or it's my wife. No, you are enclosed in that relationship. That's the best that I could kind of show it in picture form. But you are enveloped, you are enclosed, encased in this kind of bubble. If you can imagine it like a sphere. When you're entering a relationship with somebody, you're entering in a sphere. And that relationship, if you can imagine, if you're in a bubble, there's oxygen in there. And that oxygen becomes toxic if the relationship becomes toxic. And starts to kill whatever's in that relationship, okay? And every thought you have about that person, every word that you say and every action that you do is either contributing to the health of the organism or it's killing that organism. Does that make sense? It's really important because when you see a couple rotting, it's just that the air around them in the relationship is toxic, and you can clean that up. But you have to understand that you are involved in this thing that's alive. And so it's informed by every aspect of you. So you can impact that. The other thing is, recently, I had insomnia for the past year and a half, and it got worse and worse and worse and worse. And it's not like the insomnia where you can't sleep. It's the insomnia where you wake up at 2 a.m, like, bing, and you're wide awake. And then you try to sleep. I don't know if you've ever been stuck in that state, but you're like, I'm sleeping. And the harder you try, the worse the results. And then you just like smashing your head on the pillow. You're saying all sorts of stuff. I started taking all sorts of herbs and all that. Nothing really worked because there's something deeper, okay? So I started to go about 5-6 weeks ago to this place close to me in Wheat Ridge where they focus on your central nervous system. And they do all these tests where they, with your arm and like, all this stuff. And I'm sleeping again. But the thing is, they're not, when you have, let's say, a problem in your body because you haven't been taking care of it, it's like your organs are weakened. Let's say you're eating the wrong foods. You're taking gluten, but you're gluten intolerant, something like that, and you don't know it. It impacts one organ in your body, but when that organ is kind of, let's say, in pain, it requires energy from elsewhere. So it starts pulling energy from the other organs, and then everything goes off balance, okay? So now I'm sleeping 3 to 4 nights a week solid. Hasn't happened in like years this way. But now other stuff is popping up, like my thyroid, because everything's connected and we're finding balance. And so I'm on this regimen of like, I take so many pills now. I'm that guy. I remember seeing this lady. I used to work in a restaurant and I saw this lady popping all these herbal pills. I'm like, I'm never going to be like that. I'm exactly like that right now. It's crazy. So every morning I just take all, okay? So this organism of a relationship has a central nervous system. And so if it's sick, not the entire thing is sick equally. There's parts of your relationship that are sick that you need to invest in. But once that starts getting better, there's another part that's going to pop up. So you'll understand that it's this geometric thing, if like that bubble analogy. You have to work on it piece by piece. The second thing is our immune systems. I think we all learned over the past couple of years how important the immune system is. Yeah? Super important. And I believe our relationships have immune systems. So when you're living that life of investing, even when things are going well, you're still consciously investing in that relationship, that will get you through those tough times a lot easier. Does that make sense? Because the immune system of that relationship is strong. Second thing, love is about giving. So last week, in High Noon, we have a podcast, and I was like, I want to hear what other religions have to say about sex and about marriage. And I interviewed a Hindu fella and a Muslim fella. And last week, I interviewed a rabbi. He's called the Millennial Rabbi. He's got 25,000 followers on Instagram being a rabbi. It's really cool. So I interviewed him, and he blew my mind. It was my favorite podcast I've ever done. And he was talking about love. And this is the Hebrew text for love. And the reason I focus on this is because in their understanding, love is about giving. The extent to which you experience love is the extent to which you've given. And that, he was saying, is counter to everything that we learn in the West, which is, oh, he's not making me happy, right? Or like, oh, she's always like this. It's like, no, you're in that process when you're judging somebody of distancing your heart. You're creating a story here, and it's informing your heart to start closing. And now you guys are separate, more and more and more separate. So by giving, and it's the last thing we want to do when we're angry at somebody, right? We know this. It's like such basic principles, like, yeah, living for the sake of others. I have the T-shirt, right? I got the bumper sticker, right? Bumper sticker, shout out. Dr. Hendricks has some banging bumper stickers today if you guys want some. I really like them. So when you are experiencing that separation, you want the other person to come towards you, right? You give them all sorts of signs to serve you, to make things better, because it's clearly their fault. And that's a bunch of bogus. That's the time when you start giving and serving, because what you're doing is you're opening the door for reconciliation by giving first. And it's the last thing we want to do, but it's the first thing we need to do. That's something I've definitely realized. Oh, good Lord, that's so small. Can anybody read that? Can we just assume that it's good? Yeah. Who? You can read it? Yeah. Can you read it? I think he's got a booming voice.
The family is the only institution created by God. It is the school of love where people can learn how to love each other and live together in peace. And it is the training center where we practice how to build a palace of peace in the world. It is where we learn how to become a husband and wife, who will live for the sake of our spouse, and how to become a husband and wife who will travel on an eternal path of love. Family is the base camp of world peace, and it must be such that the children will say, "We have never seen our mother and father fight."
Okay, I think we can stop there. This is a really long, this is like another page of it. But that's really the essence. When I was talking to Eugene a little bit this morning, and like, what are we going to do for Ukraine from here, right? I know part of us, it's easy to want to almost be disconnected because it's like, well, what can we actually do? So, we're exposed to so much negative news. If you ever watch the news, it's pretty much all negative, right? And I think that there's obviously a time to mobilize and, sign documents and petitions, and time to give money and all this stuff. But the one constant is to focus on our families and make sure they are the bedrock of the world that we want in this time, right? That whatever peace, it's almost trite at this point. It's like whatever peace we expect out there, we need to experience in our own lives. Otherwise, it's a fantasy. When people are like, oh, North and South Korea, they must unite. Do you have anybody in your life that you resent? How about start there? Start there. A lot of small actions. I was listening to this guy who's both a statistician and a psychologist. And he was talking about there's no machine, no system that exists that isn't impacted by every part of that machine. Meaning that we are part of a human race, and every single person impacts the overall experience that we're all having. So a lot of small reconciliations add up to the potential for big reconciliation. So there's always something that we can do. And again, it's like too obvious that we're never looking for that, right? My relationship with my mom has nothing to do with North and South Korea. Horse crap. It has everything to do with North and South Korea. There's a micro and the macro, and they're very much connected, okay? I wanted to also mention this. In the unification thought, if you've ever seen Uncle Jerry Servito speak, best. He knows the unification thought like crazy, but he talks about the three hearts of God. The heart of God, first one is when God was creating everything. So excited. Nothing but hope and potential. Like when we see our little kids and like, they're going to be perfect. They're going to never mouth off to me. It's going to be amazing. And then the second heart is the heart of pain during the time of the fall. There's a quote that he had that I didn't bother to whip out, but from True Father that says, God was so heartbroken at the time of the fall that he basically passed out. It's like when he regained consciousness, he then picked himself up and got into the third realm of heart, which is determination, to reconcile. So to understand that in a relationship, you're going to experience all of these, right? The hope of newness in the beginning of a relationship or after you've reconciled, right? You're like, this time it's going to be different. And then the hope of pain when you're like, I screwed up again. But then the hope of determination to reconcile again. These are all the hearts of God. We're experiencing what the Creator experienced. So I wanted to talk about conditions again because we have this formula for success that I think we don't utilize to the full extent, okay? And that's by setting conditions. Conditions are a time period, you have a central figure, and you have an offering. So in the case of, this is us in Bali, okay? And I think a lot of people were confused about us and like, why did we disappear and come back? That was not our plan. We were meant to go to Malaysia for maybe 2 or 3 months, and we were in Malaysia for a month, and then we were in Bali for 10 months, 11 months. That was not a part of our plan, but the pandemic broke out when we were there. So everybody in my life was telling me, get out of Bali. Get out of there because you're stuck on an island and there's, the pandemic. And they were thinking, oh, everybody's going to start killing each other. You're going to run out of food because it's an island and like worst case scenario. I had so many people messaging me, you're being an irresponsible parent. Get your kids out of there, right? And so there's a point when they actually stopped flying people. Like they stopped international flights. And I was looking everywhere. I started booking flights. All of our flights were getting canceled. So as a man and a husband and a father, I was freaking out a little bit, right? And I was trying to figure out, I was even contemplating, can we hire somebody to like sneak us off the island or I was like looking at all these wild ideas. And then I was like, wait a second, we have this thing called a condition. It's like, let me not make this decision. Let us come together as a couple and let God make this decision with us. And the difference is this. This is what I recognize as the power of a condition. You come to a point where you can deeply recognize that the decision has already been made and you just go with that. And there's no regrets. And there's been a few times in our life when we've had to do that. And one of those times is this, where we got notification from the Balinese government that everybody on that island who wasn't from Bali was getting kicked out in a few weeks, 3 weeks. But there were no flights or anything. So I was like, bah! What do you do with that? I was like, what do you do? So I was like, honey, let's set a condition. And we, actually you probably said, honey, let's set a condition, to be honest. Right? And then every night under the stars, we read, the word and we prayed and we said, please, I was just begging, God, I'm like a simple man. Just make this decision so clearly, distinguishable that I don't have to say, this one, right? Just make it super clear, okay? The government, I'm telling you, decided you all have to leave, otherwise we're going to arrest you, we're going to fine you, whatever, right? That was their clear decision. 3 weeks later, the government was like, actually, just kidding. You can stay. You don't need a visa. You don't need to do anything. Just stay put. And we were like, what in the world? When have you ever heard a government do that, where they completely reverse course and they're like, actually, we need you? And this happened during that condition. And it was like, there's the answer. But the entire time we were on a condition to make sure that we were not doing what we wanted to do, but we were in the right place at the right time. Because when you do anything in this world, things can change like that. We're like, I have the best idea in the world. You're walking on the street, things get real dark. If you're on your own, you have no power. If you're with God, you will somehow find a way. I really believe that. And when you're with a couple and fully united, I wasn't worried about their safety. Everybody else seemed to be worried about me. Even my family were like getting really negative on me. Anyway, long story. But I was not impacted by anybody else's judgment because I didn't make that decision. I honestly didn't feel like that. And so as a couple, there's times when you really need to go beyond my thinking, your thinking. We have a game called Are You Crazy or Am I Crazy? Because the East and the West, anybody married to somebody not from America? Very different interpretations of what health is, education, everything. And so the balance is there, that vertical alignment. So forming conditions, honestly, is like a superpower. I can't recommend them enough. And as a single person or wherever you're at in life, to do a condition just helps to clear things up. Asking questions. Even when you come to Sunday service, you're meant to come with a question and you watch as your questions get answered. It's amazing, okay? Next are drop everything moments. There's a point in your life, and especially if you're married, when sometimes you have to let go of everything that you know, and you have to become an offering. And so for Uyanga and I, that's happened a few times in our family. And one time it was when she was really suffering a lot, mentally, emotionally, spiritually, and even physically. And she, in a moment of desperation, asked me to just focus on her, because I thought I'd been doing that. And that was really frustrating for me, because I was like, are you kidding me? I gave you everything. And I didn't. I gave her 97% of myself. And she said, no, give me everything. And it was so painful, because my ego was like, you don't know how hard I work for you. You don't know how I don't even sleep. I'm like, ugh. But the desperation I saw in her eyes, if you don't just acquiesce right now, you could lose everything. I felt it. It was like the scariest feeling. You know, she wasn't threatening divorce or anything, but she was in a very bad place, right? She's going into the darkness. And I was like, if I don't just give everything right now, give everything up, and at that moment, I quit my job, you know, within those next, you know, short period of time, I quit my job. We gave everything away. You're supposed to sell your stuff. We just gave it away. You know, we had a bunch of ladies ravage our house, remember? Invited a bunch of your friends over, and they just like walking out with our TV and everything. It was like, gone. Let's give it all away. It's done. This is more important than anything, right? And in that moment, and then we started traveling. Whatever we could fit in our Honda Accord, Honda Accord. Whatever we could fit in that Accord, we kept it. Anything else, we got rid of it. And we started traveling. That's actually what brought us here. It wasn't a direct route, but that's what brought us here. We needed to get out of that situation. And so there's moments in our life where you don't know what's going to happen next. All you know is you have to let go of everything and go in that direction. And that honestly saved our marriage. It also, you said, right? It saved your life. And it wasn't me. It was me not being me that saved us. Okay? It's me stopping being myself, my ego, everything, and just letting all that go to be with her. And so every once in a while, I really feel like you're going to be called to do that, and it's one of the hardest things you'll ever have to do, but I highly recommend it. This is a very confusing looking chart, but hold on. There's times when we need to really focus on our individuality, focus on our family, and sometimes we need to focus on something bigger than ourselves. But it's a bandwidth issue. You can only truly give the best of yourself to the world around you if the other two are really in good shape. Because if you focus on the world, but the other two are fraying, everything that you create will fall apart in front of your very eyes. Because they're not built together with God. You're empty, you know? So to kind of go back and say, you know what? Right now, I need to not volunteer for anything. I just need to focus on my family because I'm noticing some very bad tendencies within our family. That's needed. Feel okay to do that. And sometimes I'm struggling right now with my relationship. Just focus on yourself. Listen to that voice. Taking intentional days off from everything and unplugging and just doing something that fills you up is incredibly important. And if you don't do that, your giving won't be complete. It will be tainted by this desperation or this loneliness, right? So you think you're working so hard, but it's empty work. Does that make sense? And so kind of understanding where you're at in terms of bandwidth, because if you truly are filled up and your family is in a good place, you can be propelled to do amazing things in this world. But I had this great talk with Damien Dunkley 10 years, a long time ago. Where it's like the world has really figured out the first blessing really well. You know, there's a lot of self-help stuff. Tony Robbins, get fired up. And then there's a lot of third blessing stuff. There's a lot of amazing nonprofits. There's a lot of technical stuff. But that bridge of the second blessing, there really is not a lot. It's a really empty space. And because of that, whatever peace we have is not sustainable because it's sustained within the family, like in that quote. Next is the power of committing to the process of the blessing. The blessing is a ceremony, but it's also a way of life. And the process of the blessing is really letting go of the limitations of your love. And that's really hard. When a lot of people think that when you're really angry at somebody and resentful, that it's because there's something wrong with you. No, that's just the limitations of your capacity to love. You're at your limits. It's like the bubble is just, it's too strained. But the process of the blessing is allowing yourself to get to that point and then move beyond it. And when you move beyond that, it feels like you're dying. It honestly, because a part of you is. Your old self is dying. And you're giving birth to a new self. And that's actually the purpose of marriage. Because anybody with kids knows that like you have to die 10 times a day, you know? Like, especially when you have little babies. Like, last night I had this great plan to go to bed. Good luck. This guy came in. He's kicking me in the head in the middle of the night. You know, like I really wanted to punch something. I had to let that go. That's my old self of spazzing out when something bad happens. Now I just got to kind of let go. Chilling out. The chilling out process is a series of wanting to like revert to my old self, and moving beyond that. Okay? And that's the evolution of us, and that's the merit of the blessing. But if we don't commit to the process, it's very easy to stay stuck. You're stuck in a certain place within your blessing. This is fundamentally important. I was supposed to start my stopwatch, so I have some sense of time. I'll wrap it up soon. This one's huge, guys. And I realize that most people don't have a vision for their life, and especially for their marriage. They're just kind of waking up and hoping that today's going to be a great day with no plan, no vision, okay? This is from the Bible, from Proverbs, where there is no vision, the people perish. And I've seen this again and again. In my work with High Noon, I work with a lot of people about sexuality. And I was like, well, what's your vision for sexuality? Because if you don't have a vision, guess what? You'll be caught in the net of somebody else's vision. And you'll just be sucked into that vision. And it won't feel right. You know why? Because it's not your vision. It's not true to you. So in your marriage, if you don't have a vision, it's like you're going to be just repeating the same old stuff, or you might feel new, but you'll wind back with old habits. So forming a vision is so liberating, because what it does is it aligns your actions. Are we moving in the direction? A lot of people are like, are we happy or not? It's very binary, very black or white. But a much better way is, are we in line with our vision or not? If you take a detour, that's fine. We all are. It's not a linear process towards happiness or towards fulfillment. There's always detours, but the point is, if you have a clear vision and you remind yourself of that. We created a vision statement for our family a long time ago. It's pretty powerful. This kind of stuff is very powerful. But I realized that in the absence of that, you'll just end up spinning your wheels a lot and you don't know where you're going. If you can say to yourself, are we moving towards where we want to be? That's a great thing, but I would say most of us don't know what that looks like. When I used to be a pastor, I would ask people, what is Channel Gook? Like, what does this world that we're trying to build look like? And people have no idea. I was like, who's paving the roads, right? I said to them, who's paving the road? Who's picking up trash in Channel Gook? No idea. Everybody's like, probably robots, right? In the future, everything's going to be robots. They'll do all the hard work. I don't know. But without a vision, again, somebody else is going to create that future. But for yourself, I think it's fundamental to a happy marriage. These are guiding principles for High Noon, but it's what guides my life too, is prioritizing honesty, prioritizing accountability, meaning saying what you want to do and when you've gone off course. Grace is receiving grace and giving grace. Integrity is doing what you say you're going to do, and courage is having the courage to do all the aforementioned. Last thing, okay, and then we're done. You know, the Bible has a lot of weird quotes. It has a lot of inspiring quotes, but it has only a few quotes that are truly funny. And I found one that made me laugh out loud. And I want to share it with you guys. And I also want to interpret it because it's kind of weird. Better to live on a corner of a roof than share a house with a quarrelsome wife. And any guy kind of knows, there's one way of interpreting that, which is like, oh, she's at it again. I got to get out of here, right? Got to go hang out on my corner of my roof for some reason. It'd be funny if that was mandated and whenever you're struggling, you just see a bunch of men on the roofs. You can see how a family's doing. That'd be amazing. Say what? I guess not. Or if you have an apartment, I mean, that makes it super dangerous, right? If you're on like a huge building. The way that I interpret this, though, is the loneliest feeling that you can ever feel is when you don't feel connected to the people that are right there with you. It's the worst. It's so lonely because they're there, but you're not connecting. And so one thing that we've been working on in High Noon is trying to figure out the best way to express it and to live it. This idea that to become one is kind of ambiguous, a little bit hard to define, but the idea of when two minds are one, two hearts are one, two spirits and two bodies, when they're truly one, when they're in harmony, that's when you create synergy because you can feel that person and you're thinking about them and your spirit is causing your body to work and serve for that person. That's truly happiness, and that's how that's the formula for intimacy. And that's the other thing about our work with High Noon is that the goal of sexuality hasn't been defined by society. So it seems like it's the end for most people. That's all advertising is about, being cool to get the girl or guy or whatever. But sexuality is not the end. It's the means to the ultimate end, which is intimacy. But there's so many other roads to intimacy. But intimacy is a sense of closeness. And it's not just sexuality. It could be brother-sister intimacy. And so when you look at your life and you're like, am I truly intimate with the people in my life? It means how much of your heart are you letting people experience? We had a great conversation. And we realized that we've been seeing each other for years and we don't know each other at all, right? But then just that slight sharing, I was like, oh my God, she's so cool. And then you were like, he's so cool, obviously. Yeah. Yeah. So intimacy, honestly, guys, even with God, if you think about it, your relationship with God, how close do you honestly feel to God? That you know how Heavenly Parent feels. To the extent that you can intuit what God wants. Really. Because you're like, I know God's needs because I know God. Same with your spouse. Same with your kids. That intimacy time is like steeping yourself in that other person's world. So you become a little bit more of them. Because the idea of a couple becoming one is that you become like a blended color, where two colors become one color. And the process is letting go of your old color and becoming a little bit more of their color. Does that make sense? And it's very practical. There are many practical ways of doing that, but the first thing you have to do is getting to know what are the needs of the other person, what are the wants. And it takes time and investment. Those are the things that we can be doing all the time. And if you don't, you'll notice that. That's one thing. I'll just leave after this. The real kind of gauge, if you could have like a thermometer for your marriage, if you're married, or for your relationship with your parents, your relationship with God, is just think about that image. I'll go back to it. This one. Think about where you're at, the closeness of your heart. Do you feel truly like you're close or not? And if you feel separate, the things that you can do are, infinite. But you'll start to pray. This is again, conditions. What can I do? I'll leave you with this, okay? I'll leave you with this. Jerry Servito, again, has this great formula how to reconcile. If you're in a relationship with somebody, a friend or whatever, and it's strained and there's resentment, a way to reconcile is 777, the 777 method. And he was taught this by some leader, and he implements it. And I've tried it. It really works. You spend 7 days in prayer. This is, again, a condition. You set aside 21 days. And you're like, first 7 days, you pray, God, what should I do? What should I do? I'm in this relationship. There's distance between our hearts. Like, what can I possibly do on my end of this relationship to reconcile? So you pray for 7 days. Then whatever answer you get or sense that you get, the next 7 days is praying for the power to do that, because you're most likely going to be asked to do something you don't want to do. So then you're building momentum to be able to do it. And the last 7 days is you're doing it and reporting for 7 days. And at the end of those 21 days, you check and see where you're at. And you will be closer. You might not be here in terms of hearts, but you will be closer. That's the power of conditions, because you're like, you stop and you evaluate. Did this work? Did it not work? Did it work okay? Could it be better? And then you set another condition. We always do 21 days, because 21 days is like you could really check to see if you're on course. This is a formula. We have all these formulas, and if we don't use them, then we're just kind of wandering around aimlessly, hoping things are going to get better. But you can reconcile any difficult relationship if you guys follow a certain formula, and that's the power of the principle. That's the power of our teachings when we use them, when we activate them. Okay? So that's all I got. I ended that message 5 times, so I'm going to formally end it now. I hope this is helpful. Again, this is just stuff that we do, and it's the only, I will pray. I know. Bro, I'm a pro. This is the only way that I've been able to sustain this, because I'm a very flawed person, as are we all. Was that a revelation to you, Claire, that I'm flawed? Or are you so deeply aware of it that I got it. She said the latter. So I'll shut up. Okay, let's pray. I'll pray. Heavenly Parent, I really realize the value in just spending time with you, spending moments alone with you to find out how you're doing, to find out what's going on in your world, all the things that you must be thinking about. We all get caught up in our own thinking and our own feeling that we forget that there's something so much grander outside of us. And when we connect to that, we become bigger, we become more. And so, Heavenly Parent, we want to tune ourselves to you and what you're thinking about, what you're feeling, so that we can expand our capacity to love. Because that's what the world needs now. Not theoretical, not hypothetical, not slogans, but people who are really engaged in the act of expanding your love on this earth through action. And it really starts in our own heart. It really starts by rebuilding those bridges that we may have burnt, especially with the people who are closest to us. Because every time we think negatively about them, we're taking off a piece of that bridge between our hearts and theirs. And every time we quarrel, we're burning that bridge a little bit more. And so we want to rebuild those bridges so that you can have access. That's what creates this thread of humanity, is when our hearts are really truly connected through threads of activated love. And we just want to be there to help build that thread so that the fabric of humanity can be tightly wound. Right now it's fraying in many parts of this world. And although we can't do so much all the time, we can do a lot within our own lives all the time. So I pray that we can do that collectively as a community, and that we can also reconcile any relationships that might exist within this community, so that this community can help to in some way create healing on a more spiritual level for the rest of this world. So I thank you for this message, Heavenly Parent, that you offered to me, and I pray that it can register and land in some capacity in the people's hearts out there, and I pray that we can move forward together a little bit closer. And I love you so much, as does everybody here. That's why we're here, because we love you and we want to be more like you. And I offer you this prayer together with everybody here, and I report this prayer to you in the Love Family name. Amen and Aju. All right, thank you guys.